Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing MrCabs69 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. Let's play a Caro-Kann. And he's 1661, much lower rated, but as usual, we're going to play at full strength against anyone. We're going to mix it up too. Had some requests for the Caro. Last time I played it, someone commented that they wished I played it more often because it's their main opening. And I like the Caro-Kann too, so let's see what we get this time around. Usually players who play 2 knight c3 will continue with knight f3 on move 3, but it is of course possible for them to play d4 too and go into a mainline Caro. At present, like theory-wise, it seems to me that the advanced Caro-Kann, which is d4 on move 2 and then after d5 playing e5, it seems like that's the way to go. At least at the top level, I see that being played by grandmasters all the time from the white side. So if knight f3, I'll play bishop g4, pinning the knight. He actually takes on d5. Okay, so I take back.
Check.
And then bishop b5 check. Not a very enterprising way to continue for white. The knight has a tendency to be misplaced on c3 because it's blocking the c-pawn. Here I just have to decide if I want to play bishop d7 or knight c6. Bishop d7 does not hang the d5 pawn because if knight takes d5, I could take his bishop on b5. It's a little less dynamic, however, so I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards knight c6, but then after knight f3, I'd have to figure out what to do. Because I know with bishop g4, he can play h3, bishop h5, g4, and then bishop g6, knight e5 is not bad for white. I'm still going to play knight c6. I think in the event of knight f3, I'll probably play d4, actually, and attack this knight. He does play it. Yeah, so I was really considering d4. Although, I wonder if d4 can just be answered by knight e2, and then I might have trouble defending that pawn because e5, knight takes e5. You know, I'm just going to play a solid move. I'll play knight f6, simply develop. He can play knight e5, but we can always play bishop d7 to break the pin, or even queen d6, but most likely bishop d7 simply. Let's check my opponent's stats. Not a lot of games that he's played. Only 14 games total. 6 wins, 8 losses. Seems a little on the slow side because his 5-minute rating isn't very high. He does play d4. Okay, now I think I'd like to develop this bishop. Should I go to f5 or g4? I think I'll play it to g4. I'll be a little more aggressive. If he plays h3, if bishop h5, then I'd have to watch out for g4, bishop g6, knight e5 once more, after which he's threatening the knight. Say I were to play rook c8 at that point, then maybe h4 is a problem. We'll see if I can show that variation after the game. Okay, queen d3, so he breaks the pin on his knight, and now knight e5 is a distinct possibility. So I'm going to play rook c8 just as a hedge against that. So if knight e5, I can drop this bishop back, maybe even bishop d7. And I think the rook is very useful here. Yeah, he does play knight e5. Other moves are bishop h5, but I think the bishop belongs on d7. Seems to be the safest place for it. I just got done watching the first round of Norway chess, and big news, which I'm sure a lot of you guys will be aware of by the time that I release this video, but Magnus Carlsen lost on time against Veselin Topalov in a completely winning position. Apparently Magnus didn't know what the time control was, and he didn't realize that there was no extra time being added. So he lost on time. Probably a chess player's worst nightmare. A tournament chess player's worst nightmare, to lose on time in a winning position. So knight takes c6. I can take with the pawn or the bishop. If pawn takes bishop a6, rook b8, I kind of like that. I mean, his bishop on c1 can't move then because rook takes b2 is a problem. Bishop takes would be the standard move, but maybe taking with the pawn is kind of interesting too. I'm going to do it because his bishop, it's kind of like locked from his half of the board. So he can't easily return it to like e2, let's say. So I'll play this way and whoops, do not pre-move that. I was trying to motion up the board and almost pre-moved rook b7. That would have been really bad. But yeah, he has to take a timeout to defend this b pawn. That's kind of why he's playing this move, I think. Maybe queen a5 now. Queen a5 kind of eyeing the knight, also eyeing this bishop. He can reply to that with just bishop d2, though. Maybe e6 is a better move. e6, bishop f4, let's say rook b6, something along those lines. e6, bishop f4, rook b6. What if knight a4, though? Maybe my rook runs out of squares kind of fast. So I might have to pay more heed to the bishop f4 idea. Yeah, I do. I could play queen a5 intending bishop d2, rook b6 maybe. But then knight b5. And if queen takes a6, he has knight c7 check, forking my king and my queen. So that line once again is queen a5, bishop d2, rook b6, knight b5. Uncovering an attack on my queen from that d2 bishop. Queen takes a6, knight c7 check with the fork, winning for him. Okay, so I don't want to do that. Another idea here is g6, looking for bishop f4, bishop f5, hitting the queen. But again, I think this rook is going to run out of squares. It's almost like I need to be able to go to d8 with the rook. So say like queen b6. Queen b6, I'm always in range of knight a4. Weird position. Bishop c8 I could play. That looks so strange, though. Bishop c8 seems pretty safe to me, just trying to swap off that bishop, but I'd prefer to avoid that move. What about just queen c7? Queen c7 stops bishop f4, and then if he plays like g3, I guess I can always play e5 or maybe even e6. Okay, let's go queen c7. Not a glamorous move, but it does deal with the bishop f4 idea. Yeah, if g3, I think e5 is a good response. And then if he castles, I can push e4, and I like my position. Ironically, I was looking at new chess books that were published, and there's this publishing company, Chess Stars, that makes a lot of theoretical books, like opening books. And one book they have coming out is Alexei Dreyev, a Russian grandmaster who I've talked about a lot on this channel because he's one of my favorite chess players. But Dreyev writing about the Caro-Kann. And that's ironic because he's a d4 player, and he recommends, I believe, the advanced Caro-Kann is what he's analyzing in that book. And he plays the Caro-Kann from the black side, so hence his expertise in this variation. But it was interesting to see him writing from a e4 point of view because he's a notorious d4 player. He plays d4 in practically every single white game. So queen e3, that strikes me as a weird move. I think he's worried about his bishop. I think he wants to be able to retreat this bishop. Either that or he's trying to play e5, or trying to stop me from playing e5. What could I do? Queen a5 again comes to mind. e6 just comes to mind. Probably e6 is easiest. Let's play e6. Getting ready to develop the bishop to d6 and attack that pawn on h2. Yeah, this is going to be fine. Plays a3. Probably worried about bishop b4. Okay, that's fine. We'll put the bishop on d6 instead. Slight time advantage for white, but as far as the position goes, I think we're doing extremely well. Queen g5. Attacks this g7 pawn, but we can just castle out of this. Yeah. Don't need to look any further than castles. It's annoying for him because he'll have to take a timeout to defend this h-pawn. Either play like g3 or h3, because if he castles, I'm taking on h2 with check. I wouldn't want to take h2 voluntarily now because he has g3, and my bishop is not coming back. So he plays b4. So he's wasted a lot of time here, and his development is haphazard. His king is not safe. So this is like a prime opportunity to break in the center with a move like e5. It's just screaming out to be played. I'm briefly looking at stuff like taking on b4, but it doesn't work. Whereas e5 is a move perfectly in keeping with what you want to do when you have a development advantage and your opponent is playing on the sides of the board. And he's made a lot of redundant moves, like moving the queen multiple times. Okay, h3, yeah, this is not looking like it's going to be going well for him. I can take on d4 simply. I could play rook e8 if I wanted. Rook e8 is maybe sneakier. He sends me a tell. I didn't want to move there. Sorry. I'll offer him a take back. Because yeah, that does seem like it could have been a mouse slip. Okay, let's see what he does instead. Okay, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of good moves for him. Like bishop e3, I can take and then play like rook e8. Okay, he does take on e5. So let's take back. All right, so now he's getting ready to castle, but one thing I notice, he can't castle queenside because we have bishop f4 check, winning his queen. If I were to play like rook fe8 here, I threaten all these discoveries against his king, and if kingside castles, there's bishop takes h2. Moreover here, like knight e4 is very tempting. Knight e4 hitting his knight and his queen. If he plays knight takes e4, I play bishop takes b2, attacking his rook. But then I guess he can go like maybe rook b1 and a rook a2, let's say. It's probably still pretty good for me, but I'm not seeing like a further win of material there. Knight e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes b2, rook a2. I can play bishop takes a3 if I want. I mean, simply this rook fe8 move looks really strong. I mean, it guarantees virtually like the win of at least one pawn. I could take on c3 first and then play knight e4, just change up the move order. But he has moves like queen e5 or queen e3. Still looks good for me, but I don't quite see the knockout. There's so many loose pieces. Like the knight on c3 that needs constant defense, this bishop. I think I'll just play rook fe8. I suspect this isn't the best move, but it's a simple move, and I think it's going to guarantee me the win of at least a pawn. Knight e4, I bet, was also very good. He should castle kingside and just give up that h2 pawn. Let's say castles kingside, bishop takes h2 check, king h1. I'll probably play bishop f4. Yeah, just fantastic play for black, plus an extra pawn. His pieces on the queen side don't make a good impression. Yeah, I had a feeling he might do this, so he just blundered into bishop f4. Yeah. I mean, that's another reason why I played rook fe8. All right, so we're winning the queen. What is the swiftest way to win? C5 looks pretty good. Rook B6 is good. Other moves, yeah, I mean, you could just take on F2. There's so many things that are working for us at this stage. I think I'll just take on F2. Let's just grab another pawn. If Rook F1, I'll play the queen back to B6 and then maybe go C5. The time is the most important thing now. Not that I'm concerned at all, but we do want to watch the time as we're getting under 5 minutes. Okay, G3. I could play bishop F5 first. Let's do that. Then I'm threatening C2. Maybe I can misplace his rook, like force him to play rook C1, further boxing in his king. So rook C1, I'll play... Okay, he's going to offer a trade. We are happy to oblige. If rook takes, I guess I have rook E1 check even. Let's go A5. And if he takes, there's queen takes B2 mate. Pretty strong argument for not taking on E5, or on A5 rather. H4 doesn't change anything. Yeah, we're crashing through on B2. So not the most competitive game today, but hope you guys still gleaned something from this. We'll go back through and analyze it as usual afterwards. Knight A4. Yeah, staves off mate for a couple more moves. I think I can just play this, actually.
Check.
And then play rook B8 next move. And there's no good way for him to deal with the threat here. If rook D2, we take it, of course. It's the only way to prolong the game. I don't want to pre-move queen takes B2 because he could play rook H2. That'd be really embarrassing. Okay, and he resigned. No rating points for that game. We didn't go up any in rating. The gap was too big. So sad. Okay, so Caro-Kann. And like I said, most people who adopt this move order, they usually play knight F3. The point of knight F3 is that if black takes on E4, and then knight takes, and then bishop F5, which is like a standard line against D4, white can go knight G3, bishop G6, H4. And then after H6, there's knight E5, bishop here, and I believe it's queen H5 now is the move. Attacking F7. And black has to jump through hoops in order to avoid just losing immediately. So they have to play like G6 and then queen F3, and this position is no good for black. Avoid it at all costs. So therefore, if knight F3, I would have played bishop G4. And I've had a couple games that go like H3, bishop takes F3, queen takes F3, E6. And black tries to arrange all these pawns on light squares. And it's a solid position for black. Typically, he'll go knight D7, bishop D6. I think this knight can come to F6 or E7, usually to E7, I believe. But as played, like capturing on D5, I mentioned that this knight was misplaced, and I stand by that. I mean, if white's going to go down this capture road, they should just play D4 and move 2, D5, and then take, and preserve maximum flexibility with this knight. Like maybe they'll want to play C4 and then the knight behind it. This is the Panov-Bofinek variation. So doing it the other way around, he loses flexibility in attacking my center. So knight C6, knight F3, knight F6, D4, bishop G4. Okay, so here I'll put the engine on. If he had played H3, it would have forced me to make a small decision, because if bishop H5, G4 can be troublesome. I've known about this from previous games in this line, where they jump the knight into e5, and after you defend the knight, like let's say rook c8, this h4 move comes. And he's threatening to crowd the bishop and win it with h5. The point is, like, if you play h6 or h5 yourself, you're going to have to accept a pretty terrible pawn structure. So for that reason, if he had played h3, I was probably just going to take on f3, and then done something like e6, and just gone from there. White has the bishop pair, but it's not a big deal. But instead, he plays queen d3, so I just played rook c8. Computer doesn't like what I did, though. It says take on f3 anyways. Take, queen takes, and then e6, which transposes to that last variation, except that white has not played h3. So I wonder why it dislikes rook c8 so much.
Check.
Take, pawn takes, knight e5. This is kind of what happened, right? Say I just drop the bishop back and castles. It doesn't appreciate black's bishop pair. Makes sense. This knight on e5 is a powerful piece. I don't know if this is, like, clearly worse for me, though, but the computer certainly thinks so. Wow, that's a big advantage for white. e6, queen g3, maybe it's hard for me to develop my pieces, is the argument. Maybe it's simpler way back here just to play bishop d7. This move is completely fine. And it ensures that black won't be dealing with this pin that transpires after knight to c6. So that could just be a better move. But as played, so rook c8, knight e5, bishop back to d7, take on c6. I took with a pawn, maybe a bit fancy. Bishop takes is fine too. And now here, after rook b8 and then b3, I had a little bit of a think because, like, routine moves like this could land me in trouble after bishop f4. And I'm looking at my rook, and it's running out of squares rapidly. Like, if rook b6, knight a4. And again, this rook can't go to any of these squares. I don't know, maybe I can rely on tactics to avoid losing further material, like counterattack this bishop, but looks kind of bad. So I just played queen c7. I like that move. Defends against bishop f4. And now queen e3. This seemed suspect. The computer thinks that queen g3 is better, looking for a queen trade. Queen takes g3, h takes g3, e6. If bishop f4, probably now it's not as big of a deal. Yeah, rook b6, and this bishop is not defended by the queen that was on d3. So we're attacking it with tempo. We're not allowing him to play knight a4. But he played queen e3. We just played e6, a3. Yeah, the turning point was, I think, queen e3. I think white's wasting too much time already starting with this move. a3, I mean, it wasn't clear that I was going to play bishop b4 even. He should have just probably castled in this position. Although it is comfortable for black now. Bishop d6, develop and attack the h2 pawn. So a3, bishop c5, or bishop d6 rather. c5 is also good. Attacking the d4 pawn. Queen g5 is pretty much an empty threat. We just castle and defend the pawn. b4. And as I said, in this position, it's screaming out for decisive action in the center. With his last, like, 5 moves or so, he hasn't really achieved much. His king is still stuck in the middle. He still has one piece undeveloped. So it's time to strike with e5. Queen b6 is also good. Yeah, I didn't see that move. Hitting both of these points. Undefended pieces. Yeah, that's also possible. So e5, he took it. Bishop takes, and then bishop b2. And here I had a little bit of a think, just deciding what was the best way forward, because knight e4 looked extremely tempting as well. Mainly because his queen cannot retreat anywhere to assist the knight. Well, I guess queen e3 is possible. I don't know why I didn't think of that move. Queen e3. It's still bad after this move, kind of x-raying the queen and the king. But it is possible. It looks like rook f8 is just a simple solution, though. And I think now he's got to move his king, either castles or, as the computer is suggesting, king f1. But if, let's say, castles, this is the move I was looking at. Take here. It must be winning for black. Even if I just play like this, it's -4. Possibly there's a way to just trap his queen, too. Rook e5. threatening to take. Okay, and if queen h4, there's rook h5 with tempo. And then when the queen moves, there's going to be discovered attacks with the bishop. Yeah, his queen can't even go to a safe square. If queen d4, bishop
Check.
here, check. Or even faster, bishop
Check.
d1 and its mate with queen h2 coming. So there's no salvation for white at this point. He castled queenside. Huge blunder, but understandable.
Check.
And after this, it's all over. Not much left of interest. a5, just undermining move, trying to get him to compromise the b-pawn.
Check.
So, like I said, I think white's choice of opening, like putting the knight on c3, was a little dubious. If you do that in your own games, that's something you can easily correct. In e4 openings, it's more acceptable to place the knight on c3 with the pawn behind it. So, for instance, like, no one would ever say that, let's say like the four knights variation, no one would ever say that this is a bad line for white or black doing this. But e4 openings at the same time tend to prioritize development over positional factors. Then again, this did come from a Caro-Kann, but it kind of resembles more of like a closed or semi-closed opening because of the capture on d5 and just the way the pawn structure is going to turn out. And with that pawn on d5, it's better for him if he can challenge the center, I guess is the main thing. Like having the pawn back on c2 with the knight blocking it on c3 doesn't ever allow him to challenge my pawn on d5. So maybe it's less of like an e4, d4 opening thing, but more of just like your ability to challenge the center. Whereas like in, a conventional line like this, there's not really like a pawn on d5 that you're trying to knock down if you're the white side here. You already have decent control of that point anyways. Moreover, you probably wouldn't even want your pawn on c4 with a pawn on e4 because d4 would be a tremendously weak square. But, all right, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.